Hello, everyone. Welcome to Empowering the Modern Learner, Redesigning Student Support for a Changing World, held in partnership with Genio. My name is Sritu. I am the Deputy Editor for Branded Content at Times Higher Education. Learners today are changing, and so are the ways they engage with learning. As universities adapt to the preferences and learning styles of the modern student, the focus is increasingly on how they can support students in navigating everything from campus life to resource and time management. That means strengthening student support with the right tools in place. We have a great panel of experts joining us today to talk about proactive prevention first student support. I will invite them to briefly introduce themselves. Michelle, could we start with you, please?
Sure. My name is Michelle Shaw, and I'm the Director for Student Accessibility Services at Florida Atlantic University. And I've been in this position for 22 years now, long time, and I've seen a lot of changes over the years.
Thank you. And Tammy, could I come to you next?
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Tammy Wyatt. I serve as the Senior Vice Provost for Student Success at the University of Texas at San Antonio. We're a public urban serving institution, about 42 plus thousand students, approximately half first gen, Pell eligible, and 80% working learners. So excited to talk about with everyone on the panel today.
Thank you. And Glenn, can I come to you next?
Yes, thanks so much. And hello, everyone. My name is Glenn Davis, and I'm the Vice President for Student Engagement and Success at Bowling Green State University, which is a public comprehensive university in the northwest of Ohio. We serve around 20,000 students, and I've been here in this role for just about 6 years.
Thank you. And finally, Dave.
Hi, everyone. I'm the founder and CEO of Genio, Dave Tucker. I often joke that this is the only job I've ever had, as I first started during university and have grown the company over the last 16 years. Over this time, I've spent a lot of time hands-on building tools to put in the hands of neurodiverse learners to help them learn effectively and independently. And over the last few years, we've really focused on reaching more students that face very similar challenges. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today with Michelle, Glenn, and Tammy.
Thank you. Before we begin, I would like to mention that this webinar is being recorded. We will share an on-demand video and a summary article with all the participants after the webinar. We will also be taking questions from the audience, so please use the Q&A function to post any questions you would like to ask the panel. We will dive into the panel discussion soon, but before we do that, I will hand over to Dave for a brief presentation to set the stage for our conversation today.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Great to be with you. So student retention is a topic that I'm sure is front of mind for most educators, but retention is not equal. You're probably familiar with the statistics. The average retention rate in higher education in the US is 69% nationally. But for full-time first-year students, nearly one quarter will drop out within 12 months. But for part-time students in their first year, it's more than half, 54.9%, that failed to complete their first year. This matters because higher education is currently going a dramatic transformation. The traditional college or university student, which maybe historically was an affluent recent high school graduate attending full-time, is no longer the average. What used to be non-traditional learners have now become the new majority today. And this means that the shape of student support needs to change. So if traditional learners are no longer the majority, who is? Well, more than 40% are older than 22. They're not arriving straight from high school. They're working while studying, sometimes parents, sometimes veterans. They have a higher awareness of their neurodiversity, and they're potentially the first in their families to attend higher education. This shift has profound implications for how we approach teaching, learning, and student support, because these individuals face increased challenges that do affect their learning. At Genio, we analyze data on US higher education enrollment from the National Center for Education Statistics, IPEDS, and the National Post-Secondary Student Aid Study. And we identified similarities in the common learning challenges faced by the new majority. We believe there are three main challenges that the new majority are more likely to face. So firstly, they are time and attention poor. For example, they could be working, or they're part-time students, or they may have children that they're caring for. Secondly, they are underprepared for independent learning. For example, this could be because they're mature students returning to study after a long time away from formal education, or perhaps they're first generation students and just didn't have that environment when they were younger. Thirdly, they are facing individual barriers to effective learning. For example, because they have English as a second language, perhaps they're neurodivergent, or they have a disability. In fact, using this data, we've done a deep dive into this on an institutional level. We've created personalized data sheets for institutions across the USA that show the size of cohorts of the new majority in your institution. So this data sheet also enables you to compare your institution's numbers to the average for your state and the average across the US. So if you would like access to the data sheet for your institution, please do drop your email in the chat or send us an email at the address that's here on screen. So by identifying the core challenges facing new majority students, we can identify what supports will help them. So for the time and attention poor, they need to be more efficient to be able to succeed. For the underprepared learner, they need better understanding of the study habits and techniques that will lead to success. And for those with individual barriers to learning, they're going to be served by improved accessibility and access to the learning experience. But universally, they are facing higher levels of cognitive load. This is a summary of studies from the Nuffield Foundation, which researches student profiles within the new majority learner groups. It indicates that being time poor, underprepared, and facing learning barriers often leads to shallow learning as a result of cognitive overload. And this is crucial when we're considering retention, because new majority learners are more likely to go for a spin on the disengagement cycle. Poor learning experiences and low grades affect a learner's self-confidence and mental health. This heightens frustrations, which in turn lowers their motivation and often leads to reduced effort. After a few spins on the cycle, the learner can find themselves considering dropping out. And if you're facing higher levels of cognitive overload, your learning experience is going to be poorer. So, how can we support new majority learners within a system geared towards traditional learners? And this is what we're going to dive into as a panel shortly. But before that, I'm going to share a few ideas of what a proactive approach could look like, focusing on a model of prevention over cure when it comes to learning support. This in no way replaces the need to be reactive and provide a more complex support for students with needs, but instead, I'm wondering how we can support the new majority learners from the get-go on their learning journey. Our approach at Genio in designing EdTech is focused on how we can support independent learning through careful product design. We believe that proactive support for better learning is more effective and efficient than reactive support. So this includes teaching students the skills and habits they need to be successful as part of a core curriculum, equipping learners with tools to support common learning challenges so learning is independent and doesn't need additional support, and also identifying what tools to use at the right time in the learning process and ensure that learners understand how best to use them to aid their learning. The question of how best to set students up for success is definitely not an easy one to answer. It's a very complex problem. Although study skills training may be included in orientation, that doesn't necessarily mean that students then have those skills. Study skills are rooted in habits, behaviors, and techniques that are built over time. We already know that many students are not sufficiently prepared for college. Not being able to effectively organize your time, stay on top of classes, or understand what is required for success is going to create stress. And in addition, challenges such as attention and concentration, executive functioning, and information processing are going to make the learning process far more difficult. Moreover, every student today has an LLM, an AI in their pocket. It's a learning tool of sorts, but it can be used to bypass the learning process. This is the reality of the context in which students today are studying. We of course should offer guidance on how AI should be used, but I think it's also important to be opinionated on what learning tools support effective learning and which ones may shortcut or bypass it. And this is what Genio is helping institutions to do across the US and across the world. We're working with over 1,000 institutions, sometimes with departments supporting individual cohorts of the new majority, and sometimes across the whole institution to support all students. There's a good chance that our study tools are already driving student outcomes at your institution, and you may not even know it. Hundreds of thousands of students use our flagship note-taking and lecture study tool, Genio Notes, worldwide, receiving proactive student support that is independently proven to help them persist in education, achieve better grades, and improve their study skills. Our partner institutions see increased persistence and outcomes, and especially in cohorts of the new majority. It's what we're really passionate about. Our mission is to unlock better learning for everyone. And we've always built our products on learning science principles to support the learning process. We've received the badges on screen because we approach building learning technology with integrity. We see AI as a great technology to support better learning, but we want to consciously integrate it to ensure it leads to better outcomes. Our approach helps students to get real results, as proven by our ESSA Level 3 badge, received when independent research proved that Genio Notes improves learning outcomes across several metrics, and that includes engagement, GPA, and retention. Ultimately, our belief is that the future of education is going to become increasingly learner-centered. This is why focusing on the challenges of the learner and using technology to address those challenges is going to be a part of how we create more independence and more agency for learners. After all, the only one who can do the learning is the learner themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As Dave very helpfully outlined just now, learners today no longer fit neatly into that traditional mold of a college student. So, my first question to kick off the next part of the discussion is what has fundamentally changed about student engagement in the digital era? Um, Tammy, do you have any observations you can share with us on that?
Absolutely. I think what several things, right, have changed. One is that engagement really is no longer bound by time, place, or even a single modality anymore, right? It's continuous, digital, and it's expectation driven. Today's students are navigating in an always on type of environment, but that doesn't automatically translate to meaningful engagement. And so at UT San Antonio, we see two realities coexisting. First, there's those persistent factors that remain that were mentioned earlier, like academic preparation gaps, financial pressures, and competing responsibilities are significant for our students, especially first generation adult and working learners, which we have a high population. But layered on top of that are a lot of newer dynamics like digital fatigue, reduced academic confidence post-pandemic, and this growing expectation for immediate and personalized support. And so engagement really is now, at least for our students, less about attendance, but more about connection. They want to connect to learning, to people, to purpose. And so that's why we focused at our institution on building what we call our student thriving ecosystem. And we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, later. But it's really where belonging, well-being, as well as career relevance are treated as core drivers of engagement and not as add-ons. And so if students don't see the why behind their experience, engagement just becomes transactional and they don't feel connected.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to chime in there? Glenn, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. And thanks so much. Tammy, thanks for that response. I think that is exactly right. We're seeing very similar things here at Bowling Green. And I'm coming at this primarily from a student engagement, student life perspective, though have a background in academic affairs as well. And I think that we're seeing something similar on the pure student engagement side, is we have students who have more access to more ways of connecting with each other digitally than they have ever before. We're seeing on the student life side that there is still an interest very much in kind of exploring and using those tools to engage. We're also seeing a return to very sort of person-centric, in-person ways of connecting. And we see that similar to Tammy as part of our ecosystem that we've built here, which is rooted deeply in belonging and in the research in belonging, that we know that the more our students, and Dave, you talked about this in your presentation, the more that our students know that they matter to the institution, the more likely they are to seek out when they need help, they're more likely to take advantage of the resources that are available to them. It's, of course, our responsibility to continue to introduce students to those resources, to make sure they have access to those resources in ways that are truly equitable. And at the same time, we want those students to know that they matter to us. And the more that we can create an environment where that is the case, the more likely we're going to be able to catch those challenges or help those students catch those challenges while there's still time to have an impact on them. And really briefly, Tammy, the other thing I would say too, that we're also moving from some of those more traditional metrics of things like attendance to more like, what is the impact of this activity on the students? Do they then follow up in a way that we're hoping they will following that activity, not just getting them there, but what's actually happening that leads to some of those opportunities that will allow students to both get the resources they need, but also the connections that they'll benefit from.
Thank you. To unpack that some more, we've touched on some of the factors that influence student engagement and success today. But what are some of the persistent challenges that students have been facing, and what are the new barriers that students face today? Michelle, any new factors that have come to your attention?
I know on our campus we have around just a little over 30,000 students, and we are a Hispanic serving institution. And we do, just like Tammy's, we have a lot of students that are working. So we have the non-traditional students on our campus. And so one of the things that we've seen that we have difficulty with sometimes is just, sometimes the student's life comes along and throws them a curveball. And so then they think that, there's no support for that and they just got to drop out. And so catching those students early, when we notice that they're struggling, and, trying to show that we care, that sense of belonging is really important for them. They don't want to be just a number. And so, being able to know your students, not just like from my office, we try to know all of our students as much as we can, but we're trying to get the faculty more engaged with their students, even when they have, a class of 250, trying to get to know your students, to know when there's something difficult happening, and there's things that we can do and put into place to help try to keep them engaged in that class and not drop out. Because, something came up, sometimes it's a case of, they had car trouble and it's a $2,000 repair and they don't have the money. We have some resources that we can plug into to maybe get them some financial support to keep them in school. So that's some of the things that we've seen. And especially our international students right now, and our students that are, from immigrant families. There's been a lot of stress on that because there's a lot of unknown on whether or not they're going to be taken back to their country of residence. So, it's just trying to be there and support them as much as we can to help them navigate the system.
Thank you. Tammy, is that similar to what you have seen at your institution, and how are you responding to that?
Yes, absolutely. We're seeing lots of similarities with what Michelle was describing. Um, you know, for the longest, we've focused as at UT San Antonio and other institutions, right, on, student success means higher retention and graduation rates. And it does. It's important. We're all at public institutions. Those are measures that we will always find important and need to report. But there's so much more than that, right? And so this concept of student thriving on our campus. We've really been focused over the last 5 or 6 years around how can we help our students to thrive? So not only do they get to the completion, right? They graduate, but have they fully engaged in the experience the entire time that they've been on campus? Have they engaged in all that the university has to offer? And knowing that we have to offer that support and those services and those activities in a variety of different ways, right? For our modern learners. And so what we've been looking at, we've done quite a bit of work around student thriving and asking our students, what are those barriers to thriving? What are those things that impact your ability to thrive? And we're using Dr. Lori Schreiner's work with the Thriving Quotient. And what we found consistently, and in fact, this week our students are doing that survey right now. What we found consistently is that students are wanting engagement with faculty. So connection to faculty is a huge predictor for their ability to thrive. Their own satisfaction with their mental health and well-being, which over the years has slowly creeped closer and closer to the top as being one of those prime factors as to impacting their barriers to thriving, as well as connection on campus and feeling like the institution, like Michelle had said, that the institution cares about the work and cares about them. And so we've used that data to really guide the work that we do and the how we support our students. It really hasn't changed the what. We're doing a lot, I'm sure, like Glenn and Michelle at their institutions as well, but it is helping us to really think about how we do that work, when we reach out to students, and not waiting for students to say, hey, I need help, I need support, that we are calling. And we're not calling to say, hey, you owe us a bill. We're calling to say, hey, we've noticed you haven't engaged in the learning management system. Can we help you? Is everything okay? Hey, we've noticed that we've seen some reduction in engagement on campus. How can we get you back? What are things that we can do to bring you back to campus? And so that's how we've been approaching this work.
Thank you. Glenn, just picking up on Tammy's point about student success, how has the definition of student success evolved in a world where traditional or some of the traditional milestones feel less relevant? And how can support services evolve in response to that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it does build actually both on what Michelle and Tammy talked about. I want to go back quickly to something that Tammy said about, yes, retention is important. It's a measure that we all track very, very closely. It is a lagging indicator, and it's not a complete indicator of the student experience. There are students who have a good experience at our campus who don't come back for some of the reasons that we've already talked about, or there are students who do come back but maybe didn't have a good experience. So we need to pay attention not just to that number, but to the landscape and the sort of world here that we're hoping to help co-create with our students that get them there. So I think that we've really done some work culturally on our campus over the last couple of years to complicate that metric of retention. Still very important, still gets reported to the Board of Trustees and IPEDS, and there's no question that that's an important element, but taking some of the pressure off that, there's no magic formula that gets us to a higher retention rate. There's hard work that is student focused, based in research, grounded in people that increase the likelihood that more of our students will get the support that they need. But our hope is that our students who aren't able to return do so knowing that they were supported, and they can always come back. So I want to just kind of put that out there too, that complicating that retention as the metric. I think one of the things in that same vein, and Sridhar, to your question about how has the definition of student success evolved, something that we've leaned into very heavily here at Bowling Green is ensuring, and Dave, you talked about this a little bit, we want to make sure that students are equipped with tools, strategies, and confidence to navigate the systems that we have for them here. It's up to us to continue to make those systems easier to navigate. We have to make the right things challenging for our students, what they're doing in the classroom, what they're doing in their co-curricular spaces, of course, but it's on us to clean up the systems as much as possible to ensure there's equitable access to the resources that we have. But we use design thinking at Bowling Green as something that all of our students learn coming in, and that's reinforced both curricularly and co-curricularly. And that's a problem-solving framework. You all are familiar with it, that puts students in more of an ownership role of the experience that they have and help them know that those challenges they face are a normal and natural part of the learner's experience, even disaggregated for all of the different kinds of folks that we've talked about today. How can those roadblocks and how can having a skill set like design thinking, which is intended to be iterative and very resilience forward, how can we help to make sure that our students um, are they know we're paying attention to the point that Michelle and Tammy made, and we know they're also paying attention, right? We want to make sure that we're meeting them so that they are going to be equipped once they graduate to navigate those same kinds of challenges as well.
Mhm.
So that's one of the ways that we're working to redefine student success, and some of the impact is students' abilities to navigate some of those elements. We have the ecosystem. We also want that student ownership, and then we work together as a partner.
Thank you. We've touched on the need for support services to evolve based on changing needs as well as the different profiles of learners that are coming in today. So, when we have such diverse cohorts of students, what does all-round proactive guidance or support look like across the student's life cycle? So, thinking more about student success in practice. Michelle, could I come to you on that, please?
Boy, that one's it's overarching because my main focus is my students with disabilities, and that's who I work with the most. But I do work with a lot of other students outside of my space too. But I don't know, in this day and age for our students, I just see it as, after COVID, I think one of the biggest challenges that we saw was the connection was missing. Like there was a missing link, like they forgot how to talk to each other, like one on one, like not on a phone or on the internet. And we saw a lot of problems with that. So we tried to do more engagement with our students by, going to where they were at, like going into housing, going to the breezeway, which is we call it our backbone of our university. That's where all the students usually hang out sometimes, in between classes, and just tried to be there to talk to them about the services and this and what we have available to them and how they can engage in that. And our biggest push, because in the state of Florida we have some interesting politics, is related to career. Like how can we show the students how the degree that they're pursuing right now connects to their career that they want to go into, and how we can kind of guide them along the way to start doing some internships or taking an internship course, or just doing what we have these mini internships we do, they're online, just to kind of get them engaged within that major, within that career that they want to get into, and showing them, what that entails and how to be there, but with the support network in place for them. Um, and I think that engagement with our students has been really successful with our students. We've seen a lot of students post graduation already employed. We've actually lost a couple of students that got employed without graduating as well. So that's been like a big push for us in the realm of student success, and the technology as well. Um, so my office in particular, we've always been involved in technology. We're always looking for the latest tools and things that are out there to help students be successful, and be independent, because that's the number one thing is they need to be independent. We want them to be able to do the job just like anybody else. And so I'm also into universal design learning. So making sure that the tools are not just available for my students, but for all the students, to help them be successful in their classes. So there's a lot of little pieces that we kind of throw in there within our area of the campus. But the technology, I think, is a big piece, because it's where the students are at and they love an app on their phone. that we know. If we can share that there's something that's an app on their phone and they can use it to be successful, they're going to buy it. They're going to take it. So I hope that helps. It's like I was all over the place on that answer, but uh, that's kind of where we are with the
Yeah,
students.
absolutely. Thank you so much. And of course, we will come back to the technology point in a few minutes. But before we move on to that point, a follow-up question that I had for the panel was, are there any aspects of the modern student journey that are sometimes maybe overlooked or that the traditional support systems that haven't quite caught up to? Um, what are your observations on that? Tammy, can I come to you on that, if that's okay?
Sure, sure. I think for us, as we're thinking about, right, the working learner, um, and it's about time, right, what was mentioned earlier, but time to fully engage in the experiences that are necessary for students to be competitive in the workforce, right? And so we've spent a great deal of time of, as an institution, we work on making sure that we can cover students' cost of attendance. We can get them in the classroom, but it's so much more than that. And it comes back to this concept around thriving again, right? How can we then create that experience? And not only is there cost of attendance for students to go to a university, but there's the cost of the experience as well. And that's whether that's with time, that's taking them away from their work, their job, their career, their multiple jobs for many of our students' cases. But also then there's the actual financial cost to that. Many things may cost. And so financial barriers for our students are huge. In addition to those competing priorities with family, and having to often support their family. So it often circles back to finances. And so we've been focusing a lot of our efforts in working with multiple external sources of funding, whether that's through grants, through foundations, through philanthropy, whatever it may be, but to provide funding support so that our students can engage in those types of activities. But we've also been working with faculty as we build out the curriculum. How can we embed that? How can we embed those career readiness and future readiness skills that are necessary into the curriculum so it doesn't become an add-on, it's embedded in. And so we're trying to address that full circle for the student so we can provide the financial support when needed, but also address that time component. So how can we embed it into the actual curriculum? And so we work with faculty to help them and guide them in building out those experiences within the curriculum.
Thank you. Glenn, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, Tammy, I think both those responses were great. And I think I'll take a much narrower slice of that, if that's okay. But something that we've had to challenge ourselves with, Sriti, you talked about the aspect that gets overlooked. We do track a lot of information about our students, as I think many of our campuses do, all with an eye toward ensuring that we can provide that more proactive all-around guidance for students at every step of the way. One of the things that we found and really had to challenge ourselves with was we do have a sort of modified engagement index. So students, based on how they're engaging on our campus, and we partner very closely with our Office of Residence Life, which is part of our division, and we work very closely with them. We are a predominantly residential campus, which is a little bit different from I know from folks on my colleagues on the call. So we wanted to make sure that we were making really effective use of that partnership so that we can connect with students. One of the things that we realized, we saw it in the data at first, and then we confirmed it by actually just talking to lots and lots of students, is that engagement that we all talk about and know is so important isn't the right thing for every student. And I think this goes for working learners, for students who may be neurodiverse, not in a way that is monolithic, to be clear, but our instinct is to want to make sure every student gets engaged. And there are many students on our campus who are engaging in ways that might not be visible to us, but are working perfectly well for them. So how can we make sure that we are we would never take a one size fits all approach to engagement. I want to make that clear. But at the same time, our instinct is to want to get more and more, right? But in some cases, the students are doing exactly what they want to be doing. And they may be engaging in ways that are perfectly, that they feel valued, even though it might not be obvious to us. So there are plenty of our students who are not engaging with who are not sort of meeting our more traditional metrics, but are thriving, to use Tammy's term as well. So that's one of the things that I think we were overlooking and are now have built into the way that we engage and build out some of our engagement models.
Thank you. Circling back to Michelle's point about technology and how it can help, we often speak about meeting students where they are, and a lot of young learners, especially, are tech savvy and digitally engaged. What opportunities does that offer to institutions for using technology to improve study skills and confidence in students? Who would like to take that one?
I might jump in here. Yeah, it won't surprise you that I think technology has a huge role to play, especially in the future of education and learning. And we've talked on the panel about some of the challenges facing students, this idea of connectedness, belonging, mental health, motivation, confidence. And the truth is they're all interconnected. At-risk students are 2 times more likely to express mental health challenges than those who aren't. It it is intuitively true that if you're really stressed and struggling, then your academic performance is going to get worse as well. And I think what technology can do is it can bring independence and agency to learners. And I think one of the new contexts that learners find themselves in, thanks to social media, is we're passive consumers of information. And that is the opposite of what you need in an educational context. You need to be active producers and creators. And that is such a behavioral shift. And I think that's why, Glenn, you talked about the design thinking and those workshops. I think how you get students to feel that sense of agency is really important. And technology empowers. It's a tool that's put in the hands of learners, and often it can help unblock or overcome what was a fundamental challenge to that learner. And this is, something I've seen firsthand over the years. Even in the very earliest days when our software was very simple, we had so many stories of students who said, I lived in a D world my whole life. I thought I was stupid, but I never realized I needed this something, something, and now I have it. I'm getting A's for the first time. And really, that's less about the technology and more about the confidence that it brings to learners. And I think it's on that theme of empowerment and agency. And I think we can think of technology as being in this box or serving a particular purpose. But I think when put in the hands of learners, it can become something bigger. But of course, there are things we've got to be careful about as well. And I mentioned on my talk, every tool, every student now has a ChatGPT or similar in their pocket. And that can be quite dangerous as well. And when you're very stressed and you're struggling, of course, you're going to turn to the solution that's easiest. But that's also going to shortcut the learning process. And I think this is quite similar to fast food in some ways. Yes, it's going to satiate temporarily, but it's not going to be healthy in the long term. And these are some of the challenges that we're facing that we're going to have to find solutions to, because the technology is not going to go away.
Thank you. If I could stay with you for a minute, Dave, picking up on that AI point there, different institutions are at different stages of adopting AI. So, how can they move from experimenting with emerging technologies like AI to using them at scale to support learning and engagement meaningfully? Do you have any advice or strategies to share on that point?
I think it's one of these cases where AI technology can mean so many things in so many different contexts, and there's so many ways of it integrating into the teaching and learning experience. I think when carefully used as part of a teaching and learning experience, you know, the potential is huge, right? It can provide constant feedback. It can personalize the experience for different individuals. Like, this is technology that people are working on that maybe isn't quite where it needs to be, but there's a trajectory that we're on. But I think the challenge is that students are using that technology, and if they don't have an alternative that's better for them, then they're probably going to default to the thing that's not as good for them. And this is why I think it is important to experiment with tools that aren't just about the instructional experience, but they're actually there to support the learner themselves, for independent study, kind of what they do outside of the classroom. And there are various companies, we're one of them, but there's many out there who do want to solve this problem and do want to focus on understanding the challenges facing learners, understanding how technology, if we go back to first principles, we can rethink how we actually support certain activities or learning processes. And so I do think it's important for institutions to not put the blockers on experimenting, but actually proactively try to find these tools, trial them with students, and then understand, the impact, understand the feedback from the learners themselves. I do think that when it comes to learning engineering, so that's kind of a new discipline that's emerging that combines human-centered design, learning design, and then using data and engineering to iteratively improve solutions. That is something that I think is going to become increasingly important. And I think what is going to incentivize companies such as ourselves who are designing solutions is for there to be, you know, pretty high standards in terms of what educators want from their learning tools, because that will mean that companies need to develop to meet those standards. But of course, that shouldn't be done in isolation. I think it is about collaboration, and we're at a time where collaboration, is easier and more important than ever.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up to the panel. Would anyone else like to share any stories or insights on how your institution is approaching technology and any challenges you have faced in that process? Michelle, can I come back to you on that?
Yeah, we can definitely. I mean, I can say from our institution, we do have an AI policy that we've implemented. And we're trying to show the students how to utilize AI in a positive manner rather than a negative manner. To kind of give an example, like they had the students have to write a paper on a topic, and then they had to use AI to write the same paper on the topics, and they showed how there was flaws in the information that it was pulling in was not correct. And so they were just showing, that's a way that, that's a bad way to use AI. But if you put some information into, say, like a chat GPT, like I do an activity with my students where we write these smart objectives and then they have to write um, a way to assess that. And so by putting in that smart objective and asking them to create an assessment, it shows them how they can use that in a positive manner, um, to use the AI. That's just one example that I can think of. But the technology itself, I think, because of COVID, even though COVID was a bad thing in a sense, it also was a good thing because it helped flip the way that institutions look at technology. And it's evolved to meet the needs of the students. Because I think a lot of our students had a need, but it wasn't there to support them, like having access to be able to listen to their books at their pace as an MP3 while they're driving home from work to go pick up the kids. Giving those tools to them and for free, I think has been really beneficial for them. And we've had Genio now. We're going to be going into our third year. We've been sharing that out with the students that are not registered with my office. And we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from them that it's really helped them to go back and listen and review their notes. Whereas before they would just take notes in class on their computer, while maybe doing some social media. And then, they don't go back to it until there's a final. And I found that most of them now are going back and looking at the information before that. And I think that's a positive thing for them to be learning. So having those tools available and using funding to support that, so it's not coming out of people's budgets, I think it is a plus. And I think as we evolve and we keep looking and we keep changing, we're just going to have to keep implementing more technology and have it available for the students, to help them be successful and learn the way that they want to learn, not learning in the box, because I think that's how we used to be. We used to be in a box and this is how everybody needs to learn, and that's not the way we learn. And I think that's been really helpful, especially for our students that English isn't their first language. I think that's been a huge game changer for them. We've had more success in that area. So.
Thank you. There are, of course, other considerations when it comes to technology in terms of digital poverty and access, as you touched on, Michelle. What is the role of providing flexible and accessible learning tools in making sure that students can actively take part in their academic journey right from day one? I guess, Michelle, that aligns closely with your role. So, would you like to share your perspectives on that?
Yeah, I just think that it's a really important to put that, out first. And for our students, we like them to register with our office early so we can train them before the semester, starts, so that they're ready to go. That doesn't always work because we always get the students that come afterwards. But I think having them prepared, and understanding what their needs are, as a student, understanding who they are and how they learn the best is really, really important. And I think that's where we need to evolve as universities is looking at, you know, what does our populations look like? What are their needs? What do we need to provide them? So finding those tools and looking out and making sure that not only those tools are available for free, but also I'm fully involved in Title II accessibility right now. And so making sure that everything that we have on our websites, on our Canvas, LMS, any materials whatsoever is fully accessible for anybody to utilize with the different learning softwares that are out there. And, you know, a lot of times we get a lot of pushback on that from certain areas, mostly some of the faculty. But but training them the reason behind it and the need behind it, and expressing that it's not just for individuals with disabilities, it's for individuals with different learning needs, you know, is really important. And then they kind of have an aha moment. That's what we've been seeing a lot of. And then they've actually embraced some of the tools, a lot of people like with Microsoft, they don't know that, the dictate, the accessibility checker, the read aloud. These are things that can make your life so much easier as a student or as an employee. And just showing them how to use those tools and giving them that information ahead of time, I think is really important as we, you know, continue on this journey of the changes in higher ed.
Thank you. Uh, Glenn, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Michelle touched on really those big questions, and David builds on what you were talking about regarding sort of the student expectation. I'll take a really low fidelity approach to this, a low tech way to respond to this, because we have an incredibly engaged undergraduate student government here on our campus, and one of their platforms this year, this is a group that I work as I co-advise them, so I have a chance to work with them weekly. And one of their platforms this year was to increase access to academic support for students outside of the traditional ones that we use on our campus, both technologically and in person. So our tutoring center or our technologies that are embedded in our LMS and things like that. And they looked to a concept called body doubling, which is really just working together with someone in parallel on separate projects, essentially. So they created spaces across campus at various times that met the needs of students who might be in class all day, who might be part of the marching band and are blocked out. So they had them at sort of distinct times across the day, and they just had a space for people to come and work together on separate things in order to accomplish their goals together. And we're seeing those kinds of things are actually very popular for our students. for our students who are looking for alternative ways to hold themselves and each other accountable for the kinds of outcomes. So I'll take that low-tech approach to our answer to the question.
Thank you. Building on that point, especially about meeting student expectations for students who are juggling different responsibilities, technology can be helpful in offering that. But at the same time, there are so many tools out there to choose from. So my question is, what should institutions look for? What are those essential features that they need to in order to support students more effectively, considering all the challenges that we have spoken about so far. Tammy, can I get your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So the tools, what do the tools need to, is that your question? Right?
What should institutions look for when adopting digital tools, especially given all the challenges?
Right. Well, my institutional research colleague would say an API first and foremost, because we need systems that will integrate together, right? Multiple tools, right? We need multiple tools working together, not in silos. And so for us, as we have a student success technology platform that is kind of our enterprise success technology system, but we have multiple data sources feeding into that, right? And so for those to be able to speak together, for that plumbing to work, to where we can have a space as professionals where we can see the data, right? Where we can go in and we can have access to data. We see the data in a way that is making sense, that is actionable. And so rather than having 5, 10, 15 systems where people are working in their own individual space, at our institution, we're bringing all of those together so that everyone can see how those systems are working, and doing that in a way that's standardized and systematic, and so that we can take actions for the students appropriately. And so I think first and foremost, systems need to be able to speak to one another, and software programs, platforms, whatever it may be, because we need as much data as we can have on our students so that we can take that personalized, proactive approach and see those leading indicators, not the lagging indicators, right? Can see, is this, and then also be able to say, is this more career readiness focused? Is this more engagement focused? Is this more academic preparedness focused? But you've got to have those systems where they're speaking to one another, and that takes time to build out, but it's essential.
Thank you.
Co-sign everything Tammy said. Sorry, yeah, that integration is so critical.
Okay, before we speak more about data-informed support, I would like to take a question from the Q&A, which is, can we hear more about design thinking model and problem-solving framework Glenn discussed? I would love to hear more about the ownership aspect that is being discussed and how other institutions can incorporate this.
I'd be happy to, and I'd also be happy to connect with folks after the call as well. I can say as briefly as I can, because I know there's a couple more questions that we want to get to, is our institution made a decision 7 years ago now, actually prior to my arriving on campus, that design thinking was going to be the framework that we leaned into to ensure that students understood how to go to college in ways that were going to be effective to them. It's that well-studied Gallup poll that I'm sure we're all familiar with, that how to go to college really does make a huge difference. Michelle, that builds on one of those elements is also on, faculty connection, things like that. So making the decision institutionally, I can't underscore the importance of that enough. I think some of you may have experienced, I've experienced in my career, times where there is a decision made that this is the new direction that we're going to go, and then you might spend a year or two. Maybe you don't get quite the buy-in that's going to be needed to see the impact. And then maybe someone leaves or another decision is made, and then all that work is shelved and you move in another direction. So we've actually been very consistent with this approach, and it has really benefited us. And what it's allowed us to do, we've been very careful in the way that we have rolled this out across campus to ensure that we've had both faculty, academic leadership, and staff and student buy-in on why this particular model. It's not the only model. There are many, many different ways that we could approach this. The Thriving Index is another great example of ways that institutions can have a real and lasting impact on students. We just made a different decision, and the results. I'm continually impressed and grateful for colleagues who are willing to understand why this design thinking approach is the direction that we've moved. And we're now to a point where that framework is embedded not just in our co-curricular work, which it absolutely is, and it's in the residence education curriculum, it's all over in our student engagement curriculum, but it's also in our actual academic curriculum. So we have every one of our College of Business students has a design thinking component of their Intro to Business course. The same goes for criminal justice. And so we teach a standalone course that about 1,000 students take every year, but we have larger and larger groups of faculty who are interested and seeing the benefit of that level of kind of, or how design thinking leads to ownership for our students. And so we're not really asking people at this point. We have people who are coming to see how we can help them embed it in ways that are consonant with their own approaches and their own disciplinary approaches. So it's not an imposition, it's really a partnership.
Thank you so much. And going back to that question about data and support, it can be that even when student success is a top priority for institutions, there can sometimes be a gap in how well they use data to inform decisions and initiatives. So, do you have any advice on how institutions can use data better to identify at-risk students earlier and offer support? Perhaps, Dave, I could come to you on that to hear your perspectives from a tech provider point of view.
I think data's been a big theme for quite a while, and there's access to data and there's how you utilize that data as well. I would say we're probably still scratching the surface in terms of learning technology in the hands of learners. I think there's a lot more that can happen. And inherently, that means the data sources are very much revolved around the teaching and instructional experience and maybe the interactions with the LMSs and other touch points with the universities. And that part of the student's study and learning process that happens outside of that is a bit of a black box. But I still think it's useful. I think one of the challenges, of course, is a lot of those tools, such as the LMSs, weren't necessarily designed kind of learner first. The learners, as far as I'm aware, like to spend as little time in it as possible and kind of go in, like access the materials they need, do what is required, and then come out. So I think what sources of data are most valuable and relevant is a big question. And I think we're going to see more opportunities get created, especially, again, from our perspective, the more learning tools put in the hands of learners to help them overcome their challenges and support their independent activities become more widely used. And I think what's really critical there is that the data gets plugged into the infrastructure and that institutions have access to it, but then are able to utilize that to actually do something meaningful with it.
Thank you. We only have about a couple of minutes left. Does anyone have any final remarks on that data point?
I
Uh,
want to share a little bit. So we've been doing an experimental reach out for the last, it's almost 3 years now. And what we've been doing is targeting and looking, as long as making sure that the faculty are actually using the grades in Canvas. But what we do is we analyze 3 weeks into the semester. We do another one 6 weeks into the semester. We do one at midterm, and then we do one before the last day to drop without getting an F. And what we do is we pull those students through the provost office, and then we kind of divide them up. So I take the populations that's registered with my office, and we personally call the students to check in with them and ask them, would they like to come in and meet with us and sit down, let us know what they're struggling with, so we could maybe put some tools in place for them, or talk with the faculty member if they're struggling. And I think that has had a huge impact on our retention for students, because again, they're getting that sense of belonging. Like, the director is personally calling me to ask me how I'm doing in my classes, and concerned that there's something I may be struggling with. And I think, and we're not the only department that does it. Our veterans office does it, our first generation office does it, our individual academic advisors as well. And I think that's been a really big plug on using the data, even though it's kind of a negative data, they're not doing so well, but it's being turned around into a positive to reach out and give them the support that they may need. I think that's been really helpful.
Thank you. I think we will leave it there. That's all the time we have today. I would like to thank our panelists for sharing their insights with us today. And thanks to everyone who is watching. We will share the recording of this webinar and a post-event summary article with all the participants in the coming days. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you all.